Good evening. Welcome to BackStory with Joan Goldstein. I'm Joan Goldstein. Our topic for tonight is the battle over consolidation of Princeton Township and Princeton Borough. With me today are my guests on my right, Mayor Chad Gurna, who is the mayor of Township, the Princeton Township, and has been involved with the committee since 2006. Is that right?
Yes.
Good. Okay. And on my left is David Goldfarb, who has been living in Princeton, he says, for 48 years, and he has been a member of the council of the borough, correct? And he has a position very strongly against consolidation of Princeton Township and Princeton Borough. What we're going to find out tonight is what it's all about. Okay, let's start with a report I've seen in a local newspaper. It's written by Crystal Knapp, and she says on September 20th, when the two Democratic and Republican candidates for mayor, the new ones, Yaina Moore and Republican Jill Jacara, were questioned about consolidation, neither one of them had an absolute answer of positive or negative. Says Jill Jacara, it's a very difficult topic, one that I studied a lot, and the more I study it, the more complex it is. Personally, she says, I would like to see the communities consolidate, but when it comes to the benefits we are seeking, I question whether we can achieve the savings. Okay, so why do you think these two segments should be consolidating, since they've been separate, I guess, and existing since the end of the 19th century?
Well, I think it's clear that this time around, and the Princetons have actually looked at consolidation many times. I mean, David said that he was active in the 1995-1996 campaign. Right. This time around, it's a lot different. I mean, both communities, we've looked at the demographics as a commission, very similar demographics, very similar level of diversity, very similar income ranges. The other factor is we share 13 shared services already. The only two major shared services outstanding are police and public works. And this time studying it, we took a little bit of a different approach. One of the things that we did is we brought an independent consultant to review and be with us the entire step of the way to take some of the emotions out of this very charged issue. The other thing that we did is we integrated elected officials with citizen representatives from both municipalities on our commission. David was a member of the commission representing the borough, as was Mayor Mildred Trotman, and then there were 3 citizen representatives from each municipality. The commission studied this issue at a very extensive length in a very relatively short period of time, and recommended consolidation by a vote of 9-1. Mr. Goldfarb was the only one that was to the negative. But I think clearly savings are an aspect of consolidation, but there are many other benefits. And one of them is having a single accountable government for all. Right now we have residents in both municipalities that are affected by what the other governing body does, yet they have absolutely no say on the issue. We have so many shared services that what ends up happening is we end up disenfranchising residents from both municipalities that have to attend 2 separate governing body meetings in order to get their point across. So I think having a single accountable government is critical. Through this process, we've identified a significant amount of savings, and it also gives us budget flexibility and a clear roadmap to make our community better even in the future.
All right, let's ask David why he sees it differently, or does he see it differently?
Well, I do see it differently, and the key is that there really are 3 aspects of local government. There is the delivery of services, and then there are the management of priorities, which is done through the budget process, and then there's the regulatory process, which is done through local ordinances. As Chad mentioned, we have a number of shared services. The borough has always been open to expanding the number of shared services, including the police department, which is the largest of the services that are not currently shared. But that is just one of the 3 aspects of local government. For the other 2, from the borough's perspective, there are important reasons to remain independent. By establishing our own priorities, we can manage the services that are delivered to our local residents, which in many respects are different from the services that would be delivered to the town as a whole, because the borough is more concentrated in population, has a downtown that is a significant part of the borough, and has the biggest chunk of the university, which imposes its own specific burdens and requires a specific kind of response. And also in terms of our local regulation, we would maintain control over our local zoning, noise ordinances, other issues that are somewhat different in the borough and the township. And then there's also the issue of responsiveness. You know, currently we have a mayor and council elected from the borough who answer to borough residents. And it's a relatively small town. Most of us know many people in the community, and there's a fairly high degree of responsiveness, both in terms of setting priorities and services, and also dealing with problems that arise. You know, we get calls frequently from our residents, and we're able to resolve those issues easily and rapidly.
That you can deal with it. The
Right.
question about demographics did come up. There was someone at this hearing that I went to at the Borough Hall. It was a joint commission hearing that I attended, and someone mentioned that it appears that demographics are not the same for the borough and the township, not only in terms of numbers, but they did say that people in the borough vote less for school and the townships vote more for school budgets. And I wonder whether you think that's the case. I mean, are we dealing with apples and oranges here?
Well, the borough population as a whole has fewer kids in the school system.
But that's not by demographic age, in all candidness, though. That is just simply by sheer population count.
Well, we have fewer kids per adult in the borough than in the township, and that has to do with a lot of demographics. You know, obviously we have a large student population. They have no kids in the public schools. Most of the graduate students live in the township, although we have a significant number who live in the borough. And then we have a large number of small rental units in the borough where people who have kids in public schools are less likely to be living. And it sort of gets down to the basic choice that people make when they decide to move to town. When you have kids who are going to the public schools, you may be looking for a larger house, you know, a backyard, other things that are more easily found and are less expensive in the township. And so people sort themselves out. Now, on the border areas, you know, I agree with Chad fundamentally that there are no differences. And you know, if we could draw the lines a little bit differently, you know, we'd certainly be open to that possibility. That's not going to happen anytime soon. But for the people who live in the center of town, and for the people who live in the outer rings of the township, including, you know, the Little Brook area and parts farther out, there's a conscious choice that's made when people move here, because you get more house in the township for the same amount of money, and you know, if you live in town, it comes with advantages and disadvantages. So nobody ends up where they are completely accidentally, unless truly they're in the border areas where the two towns are essentially indistinguishable.
But I think we need to take that question and really answer the question. And the question is that, you know, have we seen trends that would, you know, give you an indication that there is a different level of sentiment as it comes to funding our school district? The answer is no. The only time that we've had a school budget defeat was in 2007, and the way that the school budget operates is that it's not based on a municipal separate tally. It's actually based on the entire tally across both municipalities, and it failed by a very narrow margin. And if we looked at the last time a school budget failed, we'd have to go all the way back to 1991. So to talk about that there's a difference in terms of, you know, a sense of our common school district, I think is false when you look at the voting trends.
Well, I think I brought it up mainly because the question is who benefits and who may lose in terms of the consolidation. In other words, you've got a differing population. Some people want one thing from government, some people want another. Nobody gets everything they want. But who's going to lose? I noticed the comment was made very briefly about loss of jobs, and I wondered, you know, what does that mean? Well, how does that translate as well?
Well, you know, I mean, I think that the way that I've always approached consolidation was that, you know, I feel that our towns are very, very similar. When I look at not only just the demographics, population numbers, et cetera, I see a lot of similarities. But to David's point, the borough does have a very high density type of feel. But when you just bump it out and expand it into the township ring and add the population of those high density neighborhoods that are currently split by an arbitrarily designed municipal border, 60% of the population of what would be the combined municipality would live in those high density neighborhoods. So to say that there would be a different level of attention or priority, I think is inaccurate when you look at the true demographic base.
Mm-hmm. But the higher the density, would it have something to do with the social class, or low income, or higher income, or middle income?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It really depends on the housing stock. I mean, we have fairly high density in the western section in both municipalities. But if you look at streets like Moore and Jefferson, those have very common homes. Homes are virtually identical on the township side of the street and the borough side of the street. There's no difference. Yeah. And I think that there's a certain level of fear, and that is understandable when it comes to consolidation. Change is hard. Change is not easy. Mm-hmm. But I think the only way we can focus on that is to look at the facts. And when we look at the facts, I find it a very difficult argument to say that there would be different priorities. Especially when we looked at focus groups and have had a numerous amount of neighborhood meetings, and the feedback that we've gotten from residents, whether it's borough or township, the priorities were very, very much aligned with one another.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, but if the priorities were aligned, you have to wonder why the two towns have made different decisions about the delivery of services over the years.
Okay.
And there certainly are significant differences, particularly when it comes to public works services. The borough not only provides garbage collection through a municipal contract, it basically will pick anything up off the curb, with very minor exceptions that are basically related to environmental concerns. And in the township, there is very limited, well, there's no municipal garbage collection, very limited brush and debris pickup. So if that was identified as a concern that township residents shared, you have to wonder why over all these years the township has not decided to offer that as a municipal service. Particularly because the Consolidation Commission has identified a potential savings for township residents by extending garbage collection into the township. I mean, this is something I agree with in terms of the conclusion that the commission reached.
But I think that there's a clear explanation for that. When we're separate, there is a different level of population focus. When we're combined, it would be clear that 60% of the combined population would be in a higher density area. So when you combine, we are better united to unify our resources and deal with our common issues. When we're separated, I think an argument can be made that the downtown and the higher density neighborhoods would have a stronger voice in a larger municipality, and I think that's a positive thing.
Well, the downtown concerns, both among residents of the downtown and among merchants who operate in the downtown, is heard very loudly and clearly in the borough. That it is literally our number one priority. If you ask any elected official, this is for many, many, many reasons. First of all, it reflects on who we are. When people think of Princeton, they think of the downtown and the adjacent parts of the university as being, Princeton, that image in their mind. The downtown is a very, very important part of our tax base. The merchant community generates a significant amount of taxes that our residents would otherwise have to pay. And for people who live in the downtown, including me, what goes on there affects our lives very directly. It isn't, my neighbor and I can reach out our respective windows and shake hands. And the neighbor on the other side is on the other side of a common wall. So we live close together, and that creates, issues that are different from people who live even in the border areas where I grew up. As I mentioned, my parents still live in the house where I grew up, and they are 2 houses away from the municipal boundary between the borough and the township. It's a quarter-acre house with a big lawn, and it's a different kind of lifestyle. So if you go through and you look at all of our respective ordinances, you can see that a lot of care, time, and attention has been spent on issues created by living in a quasi-urban environment, and you can't necessarily extend those into the immediately adjacent areas. And if we consolidate, although we can keep the existing ordinances that exist in the borough, we cannot extend those ordinances into the adjacent parts of the township without extending them into the entire township. So this is the solution that Chad has suggested, where 60%, and I disagree with the numbers, but that's really not the point. There certainly are parts of the township that are very similar in character to the borough. We can't treat those as a separate neighborhood in terms of how we approach our regulatory.
But that's actually not true. I mean, one of the things that is allowed under the Local Option Municipal Consolidation Act is the creation of advisory planning districts, where we could actually unite neighborhoods and unite areas of town that have those common interests and goals, especially as it relates to major development and zoning applications. I think that's a great thing for our community, to be able to say, hey, you know, we have a downtown that we all care about. We have a very high density neighborhood here on Charlton Street, and why not create a neighborhood planning district so that we have a say in any zoning or development application that affects our neighborhood? I think that's important, and I think it's critical. But I think, you know, all of this belies a fundamental issue, and that is that, yes, there is a different size in terms of our municipalities, and that's what also has impacted the development of our zoning and ordinances over time. But we can't escape the fact that when we look at what the common goals are for our residents, they're virtually identical. And the borough is facing, you know, a difficult problem in the long term. They're 1.8 square miles. The township is 17 square miles. In a 1.8 square mile municipality, there are limited options when it comes to raising revenue. And one thing I think David and I can both agree on is that as time goes on, costs will continue to rise. And where do you generate the revenue to make sure that you end up not making decisions that adversely impact your neighborhood character and the vibrancy of your downtown? I think that consolidation provides a roadmap for us to work together collectively to slow municipal increases, to have better integrated planning, and to make sure that we realize those common goals. I mean, I think David and I have probably pretty similar goals when it comes to, you know, preserving neighborhood character and the vibrancy of the downtown. The question is how do we get there? And that's where I think we differ in terms of our approaches. I just think that consolidation provides that clear roadmap and gives us the highest probability of achieving that.
Let's just like to go back to the previous round in 1995 and 1996, where one of the compelling arguments from the Consolidation Commission at that time was that it was very important for the borough to consolidate with the township, because without consolidation, borough taxes would rise very dramatically relative to township taxes, and you know, this was the opportunity for the borough to forestall that trend. I mean, the fact is now, more than 15 years later, we have a tax rate that is lower than the townships. The tax rate has actually increased less in the borough over those intervening 15 years than in the township. Now, every year, both in the borough and in the township, it's difficult for us to balance our budgets. And I agree with Chad. Chad, it's not getting any easier.
But I have to say something here. I mean, David is correct to a certain point, but what David is not saying is that from the time that consolidation was defeated in 1996 until 2006, the borough's tax rate rose at a faster rate than the townships. In 2006, the borough received for a significant payment in lieu of taxes from the university in the amount of $1 million. And that payment in lieu of taxes was utilized to basically slow the growth of that tax rate from 2006 to present day. Now, as time goes on, you have to ask yourself, in a combined municipality, I think that we have a stronger, more flexible budget base to not fall under a threat from the university when it comes to negotiating our pilot, and we can generate a more successful result by negotiating from a point of strength rather than this disjointed weakness.
Okay, you brought in another player in the picture, and a few people have mentioned to me informally, where does the university in all of this?
They're very strongly pro-consolidation, although
I don't think that they've ever said anything about it. I think they're neutral and
they're neutral, but leaning towards consolidation.
And you know, I am sympathetic to organizations and others in the community who really are literally forced to deal with two. We've heard from Princeton Community Housing. They had a project adjacent to Elm Court where the boundary line literally went through their project. And they had to deal with two sets of building departments and two engineers and two everything else. And of course, that certainly would be eliminated with consolidation. And also, certainly the university has many projects in both communities, and some, like the current proposal, that span the municipal boundary. And for them, there is certainly an advantage from consolidation where they would be dealing with one. I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory that a consolidated municipality would be stronger in dealing with the university. The borough is identified as the place where the university is. And so the university has a stake, a very important selfish stake, and I'm not characterizing the university as selfish, but the point that I'm making is that they want the borough to be an attractive place because when their prospective faculty members and students think about coming to Princeton, the image that they get is what they see at the corner of Witherspoon and Nassau Street. And so to the extent that that is threatened, the university wants to make sure that it uses its resources to forestall or prevent that from happening.
But the question is how do we put ourselves in a position to negotiate effectively? And when your pilot payment makes up such a significant portion of your operating budget, it's tough to go in there with your hat in hand and negotiate effectively. I think when you're combined with a larger budget base, that could effectively, if we combine the two pilots together today that each municipality receives, would generate a very small portion of our combined municipal budget. I think it makes us stronger from a negotiation perspective. And if we look at where the university is expanding, it's expanding in the township. If we look at the census data from 2000 and we look at the student population, it was concentrated mostly in the borough at that time. Now there's over 2,000 students in the township. So when we look at where the university is expanding and growing, I think the university has a common collective interest in making sure that our collective community is vibrant and positive and strong economically. And the question is how do we make the point to them that they're using a lot of our emergency services and a lot of our roads and infrastructure and not paying enough in taxes as a result of that. I think the best way to do that is using a unified metric and a unified front.
Well, I would point out that the mayor and council of the borough approached the township committee fairly recently, within the last year or two, and recommended that we approach the university in a unified way. And that we could agree with each other on how the proceeds would be split. The township was not interested in doing that and instead pursued its own pilot agreement with the university.
Well, there's a clear reason for that. And the clear reason for that is that both municipalities are separate right now. And when you have to negotiate with another entity, we may be using different metrics in order to make our case. And when you combine, we can have a unified story and a unified front and make that argument together. When we are separate, it will never be able to be an effective argument because we'll be utilizing different metrics in order to make that case.
Well, speaking in rough terms, the borough gets $1 million from the university, the township gets $500,000 from the university. Combine the two, that's $1.5 million. The effect on current borough residents would be that there'd be a significant diminution of the benefit because our tax base is roughly half of what the township's is. So we are essentially getting 4 times the benefit from the university that the township
So the township wants in, is that what it is?
Well, actually,
that's not true either, though.
No?
I mean, when we look at our combined budgets, and we've done this analysis in the finance subcommittee, that's why I'm kind of surprised to hear this argument, that we already accounted for all of the borough's current revenue, whether it's parking meter revenue, whether it's pilot payments, et cetera. Combining them together and putting our budget base together, we generate over 2 times the amount of property tax revenue than the borough does. We share in anything moving forward if we're a combined community. And that means that if there is a cost increase rise in the borough, township residents that exist today would make up 68% of that cost. That's significant.
So there's a give and there's a take.
Exactly.
I'm going to ask you to do something. Let's fast forward, let's say 5 years from now. let's say consolidation has actually occurred. What will be different? What will life be like? And in what way would it be different, do you think?
Well, you know, I'm sure that we will make the best of it. You know, all of us deal every day with the challenges that we have, and many of those challenges do not involve choices. So we would manage the best that we could under consolidation. And I suspect that the political process will be much more heated, because now you're dealing with 7 elected officials where there are now 12. And I think it's likely that the governing body will not be 100% Democratic, because I believe that Republicans can make inroads now that all of the, if we consolidate, all of the positions will be up at the same time.
But that belief is not based in any fact of voting trends.
I mean, the question was, what do I think will be happening?
I know that, but I'm just saying, it's so speculative because it's not even based on any fact of our voting trends.
And I think it's likely that the new government will be still feeling its way after 5 years.
I'm sure.
But many of the things that we identify as liking best about Princeton will still be here 5 years from now. And of course, you know, and fundamentally, the town will look very, very similar. But you know, the concern is not necessarily 5 years from now. It's 15 or 20 years from now, as decisions that get made that people perceive as being in the best interest of the community, but are not necessarily the same decisions that would have been made if we had not consolidated. Now, we are all speculating. Even as Chad has said, the savings are not large enough themselves to dictate this decision. This decision is based on other criteria. And frankly, if the savings were very large, I would be in favor of consolidation, but they're not.
We're going to have to stop at this point. I'm sorry, Chad, but we have to stop at this point because we are running out of time. However, can we just let the viewers know, is this a decision that's going to be voted on in November? Is this up for vote in November coming up?
It is up for a vote in November, on November 8th, and I think I would encourage everyone to go to www.cgr.org/Princeton. There they can find all of the data and recommendations from the Commission. But you know, to just end what David had said last time, I do think we have a clear path to savings and budget flexibility under consolidation that we will not have remaining in the status quo.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Chad Gerner and Councilman David Goldfarb. Thank you for visiting BackStory with Joan Goldstein. Good night.